All right, this is John Cola with OKRaw.com. Today, what we're going to talk about is agave. Did you know that agave can make you fat? So eat agave and get fat. Why are so many raw foodists literally fat and, overweight? Well, one of the reasons may be that they eat too much agave. Yes, agave can make you fat, and here is the reason why. The reason why is that basically it's metabolized by your liver and not metabolized, in your normal digestive process. So basically, you could get what's called fatty liver. It's like what alcoholics get, and it could cause cirrhosis and other problems. The reason why it does this, and yes, even if it's raw, just because it's raw doesn't mean it's healthy, is actually a talk I give, and not everything that's raw is healthy for us. So the reason why agave is so bad is the fructose content. It's between 70% to 97% fructose, and that's just whole extracted fructose. So you might ask, well, hey, fructose, isn't that just fruit sugar? Fructose fruit? Well, yes, it's true that there's fructose in fruits, like an apple or an orange, banana, and it has fructose, but guess what the percentage of fructose is in those kinds of fruits? They're usually in 5-6% range, never as high as 70 to 97%. And even high fructose corn syrup has 55% fructose, not 70% fructose. So, there's a big sham going on. And, you are the guinea pigs. You're basically being taken, your money's being taken, you're being fed a product that's not good for you, that's going to sabotage your health. While it is true that agave is low glycemic, it still does raise your blood sugar. And I did do a test on that personally to check it out. But the real problem is that it increases your insulin resistance, which is probably even worse than being low glycemic. Just because it's low glycemic doesn't mean it's healthy. So antifreeze is low glycemic, but if dogs drink antifreeze, they'll lose their lives. So, we need to be really aware. And you know what? I could sit here and talk to you for a while about agave. And I do want to bring up one quick point before I forget. I learned about agave, and I'll tell you the history about how I learned about agave and my teachings on agave. I first learned about agave in about the year 1999 or 2000 year at the Natural Products Expo. It's a trade show for the health food industry that I attend every year to keep up to date with all the new happenings. And there was one company selling agave. And when I found it, I'm like, wow, this could possibly be a new raw food sweetener. And I discovered it because I found it here at the trade show. But after further research, I found that actually it was made with high heat, and actually it went through literally a chemical process to make it, and adding enzymes and charcoal and filtering and all these other things. And so, as people into raw foods, into health, we want to be eating real foods, and we want to get away from things that have labels and ingredient lists and all that kind of stuff. My friend Paul Nissan says if it has an ingredient list, you shouldn't be putting it into your body. I'm sitting here in my garden with collards and kale and lettuce behind me, and these things we look at, we know what it is. We need no ingredient labels. A nondescript bottle of agave. What is this? This could be tequila if it was allowed, if this was allowed to ferment more. And so, that being said, agave doesn't contain any enzymes because they have to stop the enzymatic activity, otherwise the tequila would ferment into agave. And just another reason. So anyways, back to the story. I found the agave in 1999 or 2000, and I determined it wasn't a viable raw food. Then somebody else found it and figured, oh yeah, we could market this as raw or even not as raw, and it came out for whatever reason. Because you know why? The reason is the almighty dollar, that so many companies and people selling you raw food products that may be labeled raw, that might not even be raw, that might not even really be healthy for you because they want to make a buck. So you know what I'm teaching you? I have a YouTube channel, Growing Your Greens, to teach you how to grow your own food at no charge. There's nothing in it for me, but what's my goal? My goal is to teach people how to grow their own food and eat their own food, and then they'll, be a lot healthier because they're eating whole foods that's fresh picked. And we want to be eating whole foods that are fresh picked because there's more life force, prana, chi, whatever you want to call it, as well as enzymes, nutrients, and you put rock dust minerals in the soil, it's going to be fully mineralized, so we don't need to take a mineral supplement. And that's, the best food in the world is the food that you could grow in your front yard. So back to the story. So, basically agave came out. I did a lot of research on it and actually updated my research. And in 2006, yes, year 2006, I started educating people in the raw foods community that agave was not good for us. So it's now been 4 years. And finally, some people are listening. And now, people like Brian Clement and, Joseph Mercola, Kevin Gianni, and a whole bunch of other people are now finally saying, don't eat agave, and I'm like, duh, I've been telling you guys, I've been telling everybody since 2006. Finally, they believe me. And so, this agave incident and other incidents has spawned me to give a talk I give called Just Because It's Raw Doesn't Mean It's Healthy. And I could sum that up in a few sentences. Basically, we want to be eating whole, fresh fruits and vegetables. There's a lot of things being sold to us as raw, such as agave is one of them, and cacao is another big one. And there's other things, that maybe aren't so good for us. So now the question is, John, so if agave is not that good for us, what do I use for sweetener? Okay, well, that's definitely a good question. So here's the answer. The answer is this. So when we come from a standard American diet, we come from a culture based on eating foods that are really high in sugar, with used to be like, sugar from, sugar cane, which they processed down, and then, they fed that to us. Then it was like high fructose corn syrup. And, most standard Americans eat a diet really high in high fructose corn syrup, and it's causing the obesity, one of the causes of the obesity and a lot of the other health challenges in today's society. So you could basically substitute the high fructose corn syrup with high fructose agave syrup. Why not? Why don't we call agave syrup high fructose agave syrup? Actually, I picked up an agave at the last trade show, and it says high fructose agave syrup on it. I should have that out for a prop here, but then I will use that as a prop at some of my talks I give. But so just because it's raw doesn't mean it's healthy. So just because agave is raw high fructose corn syrup, raw high fructose agave syrup, doesn't make it any healthier for us. It could cause liver damage, increases your insulin resistance. It's really high in fructose. It's highly processed. It'll make you fat, has no enzymes, and guess what? It's also addictive, so you'll go back and buy more, and those companies will keep making the money off you at the expense of your health. That's not cool. So let's get down to alternatives. So alternatives, basically, if you're not a true vegan and you're not concerned about, that stuff, which I'm not going to talk about, I think honey is a much better alternative to agave. At least it naturally occurs in nature. There's honey hives, and you could stick your hand in a honey hive and get stung to hell, but you'd be able to get the honey, and there's no factories, enzyme inhibitors, or, and actually I even heard that there's genetically modified things in the agave that they use to ferment it, to make it happen. So, we don't want to be eating that stuff. So honey is a good viable alternative if you're not a true vegan, although honey is also really high in fructose. It's about 70% fructose, but it's in a little bit different form, so it's not quite as bad. Plus, honey has a lot of other benefits. So that's probably a better alternative. But that being said, we really, really, really want to get away from eating those high sweet sugar foods. And, as I said before, we've been brought over from a standard American diet, which is really high in sugar, and that's what we're used to. So once you start eating nature sugars and the natural sugars that are, naturally occurring in fresh whole fruits, for example, then, once you start eating more fresh fruits, you're going to get to know that that is the sweetest things that we should be eating, and you're going to be more happy with that. So the best sweetener, in my opinion, is fresh fruits. The next best after that would be something like dried fruits, so that's fresh fruits less only the water. And then after that, maybe something like stevia, and I grow actually stevia over there in my garden in my herb bed. So fresh stevia leaves are the best, followed by the dried green powder, and then I'd probably go down to the more highly processed stevias. Then I'd maybe say something like honey, and then the rest, we could go down the line from there, and most things down the list wouldn't be raw. So another question is going to be, well, John, what about Yacon syrup or Jerusalem artichoke syrup or whatever other syrup they're going to be making next year. You know what? Once again, it's all being made in a factory, and let's not use those kinds of things because, there haven't been any research problems with those now, but you know what? Always when we're messing with Mother Nature, there's always going to be some problems and repercussions. Don't mess with Mother Nature. So hopefully you learned more about agave and some of the alternatives today, and hopefully you will no longer be eating agave, so you will no longer be fat and be able to live healthily on a raw foods diet. So this is John Kohler with OKRaw.com. We'll see you next time.